This morning I stitched the same old sleeve again. The thread was almost the same color off-white, like the shirt used to be before time, and detergent turned it into something that looks like the sky before a storm. The fabric is thinning at the elbow, and the stitches I've added over the years make the sleeve feel tighter than it should. I don't wear it because I have nothing else, though. That's partly true. I wear it because I remember what I gave up while wearing it. That shirt has seen things, held things, endured things. Like me. It was the same shirt I wore that day in the pawn shop, fingers trembling as I unlatched the clasp of my necklace, the only thing I ever kept from my wedding day, a thin chain with a small gold heart. I traded it for just enough money to buy them each a warm coat. Winter was coming early that year, and I couldn't stand the thought of their little arms folded against the cold, their noses red, and their lips blue on the walk to school. My son didn't want a hand-me-down jacket again, not when his friends all had ones that zipped smoothly and had no missing buttons. I told him he would have one like that, and I meant it. I remember the woman behind the counter didn't even look up. She just weighed the gold like it meant nothing. Her voice flat when she offered me the amount. It was less than what the necklace was worth, but more than what I had. So I said yes. The shirts they wore that winter were bright new and warm. They looked proud. My son even thanked me in that half-mumbling way boys do when they don't want to seem too soft. I smiled and said nothing. But I cried that night alone in the bathroom because even though I had nothing left to pawn, I felt rich just seeing them happy. This shirt didn't come from any store. It came from a roadside stall 3 sizes too big, the kind you haggle for, because it already has a mark on the sleeve. I remember buying it for myself only after all their coats were paid for. It was the last thing in my cart, and even then I hesitated. I've worn it ever since, through winters and springs, through sickness and quiet birthdays, through dinners where no one showed up, and holidays where the phone didn't ring. It's just cotton, really, but to me it holds the shape of a woman who once gave everything and asked for nothing. I used to think sacrifices meant something, that if you gave enough, loved hard enough, endured silently enough, it would come back to you in some shape or form. Not as gifts, maybe, but in love, in presence, in a phone call, a question, a visit, something. But the shirt stays, the calls don't. When I see myself in the mirror now, hair tied back the collar slightly off-center, my hands rough from too many dishes and too few hand creams, I barely recognize the woman staring back. Not because she looks worn, but because she looks invisible. I can't remember the last time someone really saw me. Not just looked at me, but noticed. Noticed the stitches in my sleeves the way I always press their favorite shirts when they visit, even if they don't stay long enough to wear them. Noticed that I remember every size they've ever worn, that I still do. This morning, as I pulled the needle through the cloth, I realized something I hadn't before. I don't mend this shirt just to wear it. I mend it because it's the only thing that remembers what I did. The only thing that's been with me through it all. The only thing that doesn't forget. They might not see the holes, but I do. I feel them, not just in the fabric, but in me. And still I stitch. I was once in a department store, standing in front of the clearance rack, holding a bright red shirt with a little tag that said, "Final Sale." It was perfect, the kind of color that made my daughter's cheeks glow. She was always drawn to red even when she was little. I remember her as a child tugging at my skirt, holding up red ribbons, red shoes, red anything. And that shirt, it was bold, youthful fun, just like her. I looked at the price. It wasn't much. Not really. But it was enough to make my stomach clench. I had already paid the water bill late that month, and I was behind on groceries. I checked my wallet, A few coins, crumpled bills, a loyalty card I never used. I held that shirt and thought I could do it. Just this once. But even then I didn't. I put it back. The real pain, though, didn't come from leaving it. It came from returning the gifts I'd already bought the week before. I had managed to get a few small things, socks, a bracelet, and a book she once mentioned. I had wrapped them myself, simple paper, no ribbon, but careful hands. But the electricity bill had come in higher than expected. I had no choice. I walked back into the store with the bag in my hand, head down, hoping no one would see me. The cashier didn't say anything when I returned them, just scanned the barcodes and handed me the refund. I remember clutching the bills like they were glass fragile and easily lost. That was the first time I felt ashamed of money in a way that stuck. Not just for not having enough, I'd lived with less, but ashamed that I couldn't give what I wanted to give, that my love had to be budgeted, that every gesture of affection came with a price tag I had to justify. Later that night, I told my daughter the gift was still on the way, that the post office was slow. She smiled and said it was fine, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the one that knew I was lying. She didn't say anything, just nodded and changed the subject. That silence sat with me. It still does, because it wasn't just about the gift. It was about what it meant, that I saw her, that I thought of her, that I wanted to give, even if the world made it hard. And even though I really tried, all she probably remembers now is that I forgot. Years later, when she tells stories about her childhood, she skips over these parts. She talks about how I was always careful with money, how I didn't splurge, how I never spoiled them. She doesn't know, or maybe doesn't want to know, how many nights I went without dinner so they could have fruit in their lunch boxes, how many red tags I had to walk away from, how many returns I made in secret. Sometimes I wonder what love looks like to them now. Expensive gifts, luxury vacations, perfect dinners laid out on white tablecloths. My kind of love was wrapped in brown paper and marked down at the register. But it was love, every penny of it. The red tag still haunts me, not because I didn't buy the shirt, but because I believed back then that love would be enough to bridge that gap, the one between what I could give and what they wished I had given. Maybe I was wrong. Still, even now, when I see clearance racks, I pause, not because I need anything, but because I remember the weight of that shirt in my hands, the almost gift, the near moment, the sacrifice that never made it home. I try not to resent them for forgetting. They didn't see what I did behind the curtain. They were just kids. But now they're adults with bank accounts and cars and clothes I can't pronounce. And when they look at me, I think they see someone who never really tried. That's what hurts the most, not the forgetting, but the rewriting. Because I tried. I really truly did. And if love had a ledger, it would be full even if my wallet wasn't. There was a day I'll never forget, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so painfully quiet. My daughter had come home from school crying. Kids had teased her about her shoes scuffed at the toes, too tight at the heel, the soles worn down from too many seasons of stretching them past their limits. She didn't say much at first, just curled up on the couch, face hidden backpack, slumped beside her like a tired dog. But I knew. Mothers know when something breaks in their child, even if it makes no sound. She told me what happened eventually in short, embarrassed gasps. I sat beside her, nodded softly, and wrapped my arms around her like I had when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Only this storm was crueler. It didn't pass by morning, and I couldn't keep it out with closed windows and gentle songs. That night, after she went to bed, I counted every coin in the sugar jar where I kept spare change. It wasn't enough, not even close. I opened my purse, dumped it on the kitchen table, The contents looked more like a collection of desperate hopes than currency. I thought of pawning something, but I had already done that for winter coats. The heater needed repair. There was no overtime left at work. I was stretched thin, fraying like the hem of my coat. So I walked next door and knocked. My neighbor was a kind woman older than me by a decade or so, and just as alone. She looked surprised to see me at her door that late, but I didn't even have to explain. I think she saw the look in my eyes, the kind of look you only get when you're about to trade your pride for a pair of shoes. She lent me the money, no questions asked. I thanked her like a woman who had just been handed air after drowning. The next day I bought my daughter new shoes, not the most expensive ones, but new. Ones that didn't pinch her heels or give her reason to lower her head at school. When I handed them to her, her eyes lit up in a way I still carry with me. She hugged me, said I was the best mom in the world. And for a moment, I believed it. I paid my neighbor back 2 weeks later, bit by bit, from what little I could save on groceries. She never rushed me. But I rushed myself, because I didn't want to owe anyone, not for love, especially not for love that should have been free. That wasn't the only time. Over the years, I borrowed quietly from friends, neighbors' store credit anywhere I could. Not because I was reckless, but because love is not a passive thing. It's active, hungry, demanding. And when your children need you, find a way to give, even if it means standing in line at a payday loan center or clipping coupons until your hands ache. I never told my children. They never knew about the nights I skipped meals or watered down soup so they could have seconds. They never knew about the late notices I hid in drawers, the shoes I stuffed with paper so I could keep wearing them for another season. They never knew about the woman who stood in the rain with holes in her shoes waiting for the bus so they could have a ride to the mall. And now they call me old-fashioned when I reuse tea bags. They joke about how I always wear the same cardigan. They ask why I don't treat myself, why I never go anywhere, why I don't just buy something new for once. And I smile, because I once borrowed money to buy them joy, and now I borrow silence to keep my dignity. I wonder sometimes if I made a mistake, if I should have said no more often, if I should have taught them what it meant to go without. But I couldn't bear it, their sadness, their longing, so I bore it instead. I see the world differently now. I see how kindness can cost you, how giving too much can hollow you out, not because you regret giving, but because no one remembers what it cost you. They walk in shoes that never hurt, and I walk on memories of the day I made sure of it. Sundays used to be for the market. I'd wake up early long before the neighborhood stirred and make a list on the back of a used envelope. Not a list of wants, those were luxuries. No, it was always a list of bare needs, rice, eggs, some vegetables if they were on sale, maybe fruit if there was enough left over and if the bruises could be cut away. I'd dress in my best walking shoes, the ones with soles so thin I could feel the gravel, and head toward the stalls. The market buzzed with mothers like me, all with the same tired eyes and determined hands, all trying to stretch $10 into $30. The noise was loud, but I liked it. It made me feel like I was part of something, like we were all working together to survive without ever saying it aloud. I remember once my youngest begged for a pair of socks. We'd passed a vendor with piles of them, bright colors, cartoon faces printed on the toes. He didn't ask for much that one, so when he tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide and hopeful, I looked at the price. Too much. $3 for one pair. I told him we'd come back. He nodded, but I saw his face fall as he let go of my sleeve. That small letting go stayed with me longer than it should have. I spent the rest of that Sunday digging through bargain bins in a different part of the market, hoping for a miracle. A slightly cheaper pair, a discount, a forgotten deal. I found some eventually. Plain white ones, no cartoons, but warm, I told him the characters must have washed off in the rain. He smiled, believed me. There were many Sundays like that, bargaining not just with vendors but with fate, holding up apples and checking both sides for rot, counting out coins in a whisper, pretending we were browsing when really I was scanning for anything I could afford without having to lie to myself later. Once I saw a woman from church. She wore perfume and makeup, her basket full of cheese and grapes, and things I only bought when someone visited. She smiled politely, glanced into my bag, and said, "Still doing the budget rounds, I see." I laughed like it was a joke, but it wasn't. After that, I started going even earlier, before the sun was fully up, before the more comfortable shoppers arrived. I didn't want to be seen choosing between carrots and onions again. It became a ritual, my quiet little war. Every item earned with thought, every purchase a calculation. It wasn't just about saving money. It was about keeping the illusion alive for them, for me, that we were okay, that there was enough, that their childhood didn't have to be heavy. I used to come home and wash everything carefully, lay it all out on the counter like I'd just returned from a feast. I'd chop and peel and cook as if I were feeding a family of kings. They never knew I skipped breakfast to buy that extra pound of rice. They never knew how I stood in the sun haggling over a chicken's neck because it would make better broth than bones. Now Sundays are quiet. There's no market trip, no list, no hopeful hand pulling at my sleeve. Just me sitting at the same table eating toast with no butter, thinking of cartoon socks and the way his little feet used to dangle from the chair. They shop at supermarkets now. Organic aisles, home delivery. Sometimes they'll send me photos. Look what we made tonight, plates bursting with color and abundance. I smile and say, "Looks delicious." They never ask what I eat. They never remember the Sundays I spent pretending we were just browsing. I walk past the market sometimes. It's still there. Different vendors now. Same energy. I see young mothers clutching bills and holding back sighs. I want to reach out and say, "You're not invisible. I see you. I was you." But I just walk on. My hands still remember the feel of cheap potatoes and warm bread through paper bags, and sometimes late at night, I dream of those Sundays. Not because they were easy, but because they were mine. And because that was the last time I truly felt needed. There was a dress once soft lilac cotton, simple but elegant. It hung in the store window for weeks, swaying gently whenever the door opened. Every time I passed by, I slowed down just a little, just long enough to imagine myself wearing it. I knew it wasn't extravagant. It didn't shimmer or cling. But it was mine in a way. I couldn't explain something about the quiet beauty of it, the way it reminded me of who I used to be before I traded everything for practicality. I went inside once just to feel it. The fabric was smooth under my fingers, cool and light, like something meant for spring mornings and soft sunlight. I looked at the price tag and laughed under my breath, not because it was expensive, but because it sat just on the edge of possible. If I moved things around, if I skipped meat for 2 weeks, if I used less detergent maybe. But the school fees were due, and my son's class needed a field trip deposit, and there were new notebooks to buy, and a strange noise coming from the refrigerator again. I let go of the dress. The saleswoman asked if I needed help, and I smiled and said, "Just looking." I lied with a grace that only mothers know, the kind of lie that doesn't sting anymore because it's been said so often. I walked home slowly that day, not because I was tired, though I always was, but because something inside me had cracked in a quiet way. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just folded the moment up neatly like a note and tucked it somewhere inside. That's how I lived for years, folding up moments and filing them away. A dress, a dinner, a day off, All the things I could have had if I didn't love so loudly, so completely. You'd be surprised how heavy those small things can be once they start adding up. I've never told anyone about that dress. No one would understand. They'd say, "It's just a piece of clothing." But it wasn't. It was a small rebellion I never let myself have. It was beauty I decided I didn't deserve. It was a gift I refused to give myself so I could give everything else to them. And now they tell me I don't take care of myself, that I should go shopping, update my wardrobe, get something nice. They don't remember the field trips, the notebooks, the repairs, the invisible sacrifices. They see an old woman in old clothes and wonder why she clings to them. What they don't know is that each thread tells a story. This cardigan bought when my husband lost his job and I found a sale on clearance. These shoes from a thrift store the week before parent-teacher conferences. This worn skirt. The one I wore the day my youngest won a writing prize and I clapped louder than anyone. I kept every promise I made to them, and in return I let my own promises drift away like paper boats in rainwater. They think I chose this life of simplicity, of modesty, of frugality, but I didn't. I chose them, over and over again, in checkout lines, at kitchen tables, in whispered prayers over ledgers and overdue bills. That dress in the window, it's gone now. The store is something else. Maybe a cafe, maybe a bank. I wouldn't know. I haven't walked that road in years. But sometimes in dreams I see it still swaying gently waiting, and I am younger, lighter, free. I wonder what would have happened if I had bought it, if I had said, "Just this once for me." But I didn't. I walked away. And I've been walking away ever since. There was a time when their voices filled every corner of this house. Laughter in the hallway, music drifting from their bedrooms, footsteps pounding down the stairs when dinner was ready. And they used to tell me everything, their crushes, their fears, the tiny daily dramas that only mattered because they were shared. I was their keeper, their confidant. I knew who had a test coming up, who had a secret, who needed clean socks by morning. But over the years something shifted. The silences grew longer. The laughter faded into phone screens. Conversations became schedules. And now when they visit, if they visit, they sit with one foot out the door, half listening, half texting, smiling, without hearing a word I say. Once my daughter used to sit beside me on the couch legs, tucked under her, and tell me her dreams, like they were fragile birds she needed me to hold for her. "Do you think I could be a writer?" she asked once, eyes wide with hope. I told her she already was, that every time she spoke, her words had the rhythm of poetry. She beamed. I held her hand. I never let her doubt herself. Now when I ask about her job, she says, "Busy." When I ask about her husband, she says, "Fine." When I ask if she's happy, she says, "Why do you always ask that?" And I don't know how to answer. Because the truth is, I'm not prying. I'm reaching. I'm trying to find the thread that used to tie us together, the one I spent decades weaving. And every time she looks away or answers short, it feels like another strand snaps. It's strange, isn't it? To go from being someone's whole world to someone they update out of obligation. Sometimes I'll start a story something small, like the time the neighbor's dog chewed through the fence, and I'll look up and see them staring at their phone. They nod at the right moments, maybe chuckle politely, but their eyes don't crinkle. Their faces don't lift. They're already gone. I've become background noise in my own home. The last time my son visited, I made his favorite meal. Took me hours. The spices, the broth, the slow simmer. I did it all exactly the way he liked. He arrived late, said he'd already eaten and left it untouched. I smiled, said it was fine. Later I packed it up, labeled it, and slid it into the freezer. It's still there. That night I sat at the table and watched his untouched bowl grow cold. I picked at my own food not because I was hungry, but because the motion of eating felt like a way to hold myself together. I used to be the one they cried to. Now I don't even get a proper goodbye. They forget that I'm not just their mother. I'm still a person. I still have stories. I still hurt, and I still remember. I remember the late night talks, the soft knocks at my door, the whispered, "Can I sleep in here tonight?" I remember braiding hair, fixing collars, cheering at school plays with eyes full of tears. I remember being their safe place, and I never asked for much in return. Just to be seen. And now even that feels like a luxury I can't afford. Sometimes I wonder if I did too much, if by making myself invisible to make their lives easier, I taught them to look through me. I carried their burdens so well they forgot I had any of my own. But even now, I don't regret loving them that way. What I regret is not holding on to myself in the process. I sit by the window most evenings, a book in my lap unread. I listen to the hum of life outside and the silence inside. It's thick, heavy, not angry, just absent. I don't expect them to tell me everything. They're grown. They have their own lives. But I wish they'd look me in the eyes when I speak. I wish they'd ask me how I really am and stay for the answer. Because I'm still here, still whole, just quieter. A woman with her stories folded neatly inside, waiting not for attention but for acknowledgement. And maybe someday they'll see me again. Not as the woman who did everything for them, but as the woman who was everything, and still is. It was my birthday. I had forgotten honestly, or maybe I had just learned to forget. When you spend so many years celebrating others, you forget what it feels like to be celebrated. But the date still lived somewhere in me, quiet and waiting like an old song I hadn't heard in a while, but would recognize instantly if someone played it. I woke up that morning to silence. No phone buzzing, no messages, no knock at the door. The house felt colder than usual. I made tea the same way I always do, steeped strong, 2 sugars, no milk. I sat at the table and looked out the window, waiting for nothing in particular, just hoping something would happen. The last time they celebrated with me, I think there were balloons, a cake, a hug so tight from my daughter that it left an imprint on my shoulder. That was years ago, back when they still thought birthdays were important, back when I still thought I mattered in those ways. I remember preparing their birthdays with such care weeks in advance, finding the exact wrapping paper they liked, blowing up balloons until I was dizzy, hiding gifts in the cupboard baking cakes that filled the house with warmth and sugar and anticipation. I would set everything up so that when they woke up, the day already felt like a celebration. It made them feel loved, and it made me feel alive. But that morning on my birthday, I sliced a bruised apple and told myself I wasn't hungry. I took 1 bite and threw the rest away. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to pretend I had. I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday. I didn't post anything, didn't drop hints, didn't make it awkward. I just waited to see who would remember. No one did. Not that day, not the next, not even in passing. I could have reminded them, of course, could have said, it was my birthday this week. But the thought of having to remind someone you brought into this world, someone whose birthdays you never once forgot, felt like pulling your own heart out and placing it on a shelf for no one to notice. I lit a candle that night, just one. No cake, no song, no wish. I watched the flame flicker and imagined a time when there were 6 candles, then 20, then 30, and little hands clapping smiling faces around the table. I imagined what it would be like if the phone rang just then and one of them said, "Happy birthday, Mom. I didn't forget." but the phone didn't ring. The candle burned down, and I went to bed the same way I had woken up quietly, with no expectation but with a heaviness I couldn't quite name. Grief, I think, not for my age, but for my invisibility. The next day, my daughter texted me a photo of her lunch, a salad she made. "Look how healthy I'm eating," she said. I replied, "Looks delicious." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask what I ate. And she didn't ask what day it had been. I looked at that text for a long time, wondering if I should say something, but I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't change anything, because birthdays like love should never have to be begged for. Later that week, I went to the store and bought myself a small bouquet of yellow daisies, the cheap kind wrapped in plastic already starting to wilt. The cashier asked if they were for someone special. I said yes. They're for someone who deserves to be remembered. And I walked home with them pressed gently to my chest like a secret. They sit on my table now, dried and curling, but still holding color. Like me. They wear shoes that shine, polished leather, brand names I can't pronounce. My daughter's heels click confidently when she walks, each step echoing a kind of success I once dreamed for her. My son wears sneakers that cost more than I spent on groceries some weeks, and I'm happy for them truly. Their feet are warm, protected, admired. But mine are wrapped in old socks with frayed cuffs and thinning soles. Sometimes when I sit down to remove my shoes after a long day of walking, the threads of my socks cling to my heels like they're too tired to let go. I mend them in secret late at night under the kitchen light. My hands are slow now, arthritis in the fingers, a soft tremble I pretend not to notice. I thread the needle by feel, not by sight. My glasses don't help much anymore. I patch and stitch and whisper to myself, just one more week, just one more walk to the store. I've told myself that same lie for years. Once my son dropped by unexpectedly. I was still in my house, clothes-worn slippers, patched socks peeking out. He looked down and wrinkled his brow. "You really need to throw those out, Mom," he said, like he was commenting on a broken lamp or old newspaper. I smiled. "They still work," I said. But what I wanted to say was, these socks have seen more of this family's struggle than you ever will. Because I remember. I remember walking to 3 different stores just to find a brand of cereal they liked. I remember the shoes I bought secondhand lined with tissue paper to fill the gaps. I remember pouring boiling water over tea bags that had already been used just to feel warm. Their new shoes are beautiful, but they've never walked through mud to get to a parent-teacher conference. They've never taped the sides of their soles because the stitching gave way. They've never been told, just a little longer, and actually waited with cold toes and quiet trust. I look at my feet now and think of all the places they've carried me through sick days, job interviews, school concerts, hospital waiting rooms, and always quietly, always without thanks. Once at a family dinner, they teased me, said I never buy anything for myself. "You're impossible, Mom. Always saving. Just treat yourself for once." I wanted to laugh, or cry, or explain. That saving wasn't stinginess. It was survival. It was knowing that one pair of good socks for them meant I'd stretch mine a little longer, that their comfort came from somewhere, from someone, and that someone was me. But I stayed quiet, as I always do. I no longer expect them to understand. Comfort is their baseline. Sacrifice is a language they don't speak anymore. Maybe they never did. Now when I shop, I still check prices before I check sizes. I still hesitate at things labeled new arrival. I still avoid shoes with shiny displays. And I still mend my socks not because I have to, but because somewhere deep inside it feels honest, like proof of a life that gave and gave and gave. My closet is small. 2 pairs of shoes, one for errands, one for church, a drawer of socks that know my life better than my own children do. But when I walk, even if it's slowly, even if it's painfully, I walk with the weight of every mile I carried for them. My pace may be slower, but my feet have earned their place on this earth. And someday when they wonder why I never asked for more, why I lived so small, maybe they'll find a sock I mended. Maybe they'll remember a winter morning when their toes were warm and mine were numb. And maybe, just maybe, they'll understand what love looks like when it has holes, but still holds. There's a kind of shame that doesn't scream. It whispers. It settles into your skin, makes a home in the way you lower your voice when asking for help. It hides behind polite smiles and phrases like, "If you're not too busy," or "only if it's no trouble." I've learned that language well. The first time I truly felt it was when I needed help carrying groceries up the stairs. My legs had been hurting more than usual, stiff at the knees, aching in the cold. The bags were heavier than they looked. I stood at the bottom step, hoping someone might offer before I asked. But the street was quiet. The silence felt louder than my pride. So I called my son. Just a short favor. I told him I had groceries and my legs were acting up. I said it gently, almost playfully, trying not to sound like I needed help, more like it would be nice to have some company. He hesitated. I heard it. That pause, that heartbeat of silence before he said, "Now's not a great time. Maybe later." Maybe later. I told him not to worry. Said I'd manage. And I did, sort of. One bag at a time, resting between steps, clutching the railing so hard I thought the metal would bend. I had to sit down on the 3rd step and breathe through the pain. A bruised apple rolled out of one of the bags and bounced down the stairs. I didn't chase it. I sat there for a long time, not just because of the pain, but because of what that pause had meant. It wasn't just groceries. It was the moment I realized I'd become a burden. After that, I stopped asking for help, not just from him, but from all of them. I convinced myself that being needed had an expiration date, that love, once so loud, could go quiet without warning. They're not unkind. That's the hardest part. They hug me hello. They ask how I'm doing in passing as their coats are still on. They bring leftover food, sometimes packaged in containers I return with gratitude. But it's not the same. It's not asking me how I'm really doing. Not staying long enough to hear the answer. Not seeing the loneliness that sits beside me like a second shadow. I remember when they used to run to me. When I was their first call, their safe space, their answer to every "What do I do now?" They used to trust me with everything. Now I trust them with nothing, not even my pain. I sweep it under the rug. I hide it behind pleasant texts and smiley emojis. I pretend the groceries aren't heavy, the loneliness isn't sharp, the aches aren't constant, because it's easier that way for them, and maybe for me too. Because asking and being denied is worse than pretending you didn't need anything at all. Sometimes when I sit in my chair with the afternoon sun spilling through the window, I think about how much quieter life becomes when no one asks about you anymore. Not your plans, your thoughts, your worries, just the basics, the weather, the news, the errands. It makes me feel like I've become a placeholder in their lives, someone they check in on out of duty, not desire. But I don't let myself dwell too long, because shame, once it takes root, can rot everything from the inside. So I plant dignity in its place. I lift my own groceries now, one bag at a time. I tie my shoes, slowly wipe down my own windows, carry out the trash with careful steps. And when I feel weak, I remind myself that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet act of not asking, of bearing. Still, I wonder what it would feel like to hear one of them say, "Mom, do you need anything today?" Not because it's Mother's Day, not because it's polite, but because they wanted to know. Because once that's all I ever asked for, to be thought of. To be remembered not just when I was useful, but when I was alone. My closet doesn't close all the way anymore. The wood has warped from years of humidity and age. The hinges creak if you pull too hard. Inside it looks full, at first glance, shirts, coats, scarves draped on plastic hangers that have lost their shape. But it's not a closet filled with clothes. It's filled with stories. There's the sweater I wore the day my son got into college. Gray wool, 2 small holes near the cuff, hidden well enough. I remember sitting in the front room holding the envelope with trembling fingers waiting for him to come home and open it. He did, and when he read the letter aloud, his voice cracked, and mine did too. That sweater still smells faintly of the perfume I used to wear back then. I haven't worn it in years, but I can't part with it. Every time I touch it, I hear his laughter. I feel the moment all over again. Next to it is the blouse I bought on clearance the year I went back to work part-time. The kids were older, and the bills were heavier than ever. That job didn't pay much, but I dressed like it did. The blouse is pale blue, the stitching uneven where I fixed a torn seam in the back. I remember ironing it carefully before every shift, making sure it looked fresh, even if my body was tired. And then there's the coat. Brown heavy, too large at the shoulders. I bought it secondhand during a particularly bitter winter. I had saved up for weeks, watching the price drop each time I walked past the consignment shop. When I finally bought it, the lining was frayed, and one button was missing. I sewed a mismatched button from my mother's old sewing tin. No one noticed, or maybe they did and were too kind to say. I used to dream of buying new clothes one day, a soft robe, a proper raincoat, something elegant for church. But the dreams got quieter. Other things came first, the braces, the birthday parties, the little emergency expenses that always arrived at the worst time. My closet became a place where time lived, where each item told me, "You chose them." Again and again, not with resentment, but with quiet, knowing love. Even now, when I open the doors, I don't see fashion. I see decisions. The times I turned away from something beautiful because they needed shoes, or books, or a new mattress when theirs started to sag. There's a dress in the back I haven't worn in over a decade. I bought it thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd go out to dinner as a family. Something simple, someplace with music and soft lighting. I imagined walking in wearing that dress, their eyes lighting up at how nice I looked. But the dinner never happened. The dress still hangs there, tags still attached. Now they send me pictures of their closets, walk-ins, color-coded labeled boxes. "Look how organized I am," they say. And I say, "Wow, beautiful." And I mean it. But I also wonder if any of their clothes carry stories, if any of their shoes remember the feeling of sacrifice, if their drawers whisper at night like mine do. Because mine do. Sometimes I sit on the bed with the closet door open, staring at the sleeves and collars and faded colors. I see my whole life in there, the years I poured into every detail, the choices I made not because I had to, but because I couldn't not. Because love made me brave and small all at once. They see clutter. I see a museum of survival. I know someday when I'm gone, someone will open this closet and wonder why I kept so many old things, why I didn't throw them out, why I clung to worn fabric and broken seams. And I truly hope they pause, even for a second, and realize those weren't just clothes. They were proof that I lived for them. I have a shirt for every season, not just spring or winter, but seasons of life. That's what I think of when I fold them now slowly with hands that tremble more than they used to. Each one has a memory stitched into it. Some people keep photo albums. I have sleeves. There's the one I wore to my son's graduation. Faded navy with tiny white flowers. I remember standing in the crowd, craning my neck to see him cross the stage. The sun was hot that day, and I clutched a paper fan in one hand, the program in the other. My palms were sweating, but my heart was full. He never looked at the crowd, never looked to find me. But I clapped so hard my hands stung. That shirt still hangs in the corner of my closet. The flowers are dull now, and there's a stain near the hem from the juice box I carried in my purse. He had joked about being too old for one, but I brought it anyway. And the cream-colored blouse I wore to my daughter's wedding. I chose it carefully, not white, not showy, just something soft and respectful. I ironed it the night before with trembling hands, imagining every detail of how the day would go. I stood in the back during the ceremony, smiling so hard my face hurt, pretending not to notice that they never called me forward for family photos. No one said anything. Not then, not after. I was just there, a witness. I still have that blouse. I haven't worn it since. It smells faintly of hairspray and roses. When I run my fingers across the fabric, I remember the sound of champagne glasses clinking and the echo of my silence in the middle of their celebration. Then there's the simple cotton tunic, the one I wore the first time I held my grandchild. They handed me the baby for a moment, quick and cautious, like I was being granted a favor. I sat in the corner of their polished living room, holding that small bundle, afraid to breathe too loudly. The baby stared up at me, blinking slowly, and for a second I thought, this is what coming home feels like. But then they took her back, and I said nothing, because you learn after a while not to ask for more time, not to linger, not to act like you deserve more. That tunic has a loose thread near the neckline. I haven't fixed it. Somehow it feels right that something from that day should remain unfinished. And there's the soft red shirt, the one I always wore when cooking their favorite meals. It still carries stains that never came out, no matter how many times I scrubbed. Curry oil, maybe even a tear or two. I used to wear it proudly like armor. It made me feel like I had a purpose, even when the house was empty, and the only people I fed were in photos on the wall. They never mentioned the shirt, or the meals, or the way I used to stand by the window when I heard a car door, hoping it was one of them stopping by, even just for leftovers. That's the thing about these shirts. They know me. They remember the woman I was when no one else was watching. They held me when I was strong, and they held me when I broke. Sometimes I imagine what they'd say if they knew how many of these shirts I still have. You should donate them, they might say. You never wear half of these. But they're wrong. I wear them in my mind, in my memories, in the quiet moments when I open the closet and let the past breathe beside me. Because these shirts, these pieces of cloth and thread, they're proof of a life spent choosing everyone else first. They're proof of meals made, tears, hidden love, given without question or condition. I may not be in their stories anymore, but they'll always be in mine, stitched into every seam, folded into every drawer. And when I wear one of these shirts, even if it's just for a moment, I feel like I'm still a mother, still a woman who loved deeply and fully in the only way she knew how. There's an empty hook by the door where coats used to hang. Heavy ones, light ones dripping with rain or dusted with snow. I used to joke that our home looked like a train station. Shoes, scattered jackets, piled bags, slumped beneath the bench. It was chaos, but it was alive. Every coat meant someone had come home. Now there's just my old cardigan. It hangs there alone like a memory too proud to be packed away. The fabric is pilled, the elbows stretched thin, the pockets sagging from years of use. I reach for it out of habit, even when I don't need warmth, maybe because some part of me still hopes someone else might come through that door. But they don't. They used to. For a time, visits were frequent. A quick stop after work, a Sunday lunch, a surprise knock with a grandchild in tow, and every time I'd hang their coats, lay out tea, pretend I hadn't been sitting in silence all day, waiting for that very sound, the rattle of keys, the sudden bloom of voices in the hallway. I'd keep their coats warm by the heater in winter. I'd press them smooth with a cloth in summer. It mattered to me, the care, the small gesture that said, "You belong here." Now when they visit, if they visit, they barely bring a coat at all, just themselves, and not even fully. One eye on the clock, the other on their phone. The conversation floats at the surface, traffic, work, the weather. Never deep, never still. They leave quickly. Their hugs are soft and distracted. They say we'll come by again soon, but they don't. And I stand at the door and watch them disappear down the path, the sound of their footsteps dissolving into the hum of the street. I wait until they're completely gone before I close the door. And then I turn to the empty hook. There's something uniquely hollow about a coat hook with no coat. It feels like a question no one's answering, like a dinner table with too many chairs, like a house dressed for company that never arrives. Sometimes I imagine hanging a stranger's coat there, just to feel what it's like to take care of someone again, to say, "Sit down, let me pour you some tea," to hear someone ask, "How have you been?" and actually want to know. But the only guests now are memories. I walk past that hook dozens of times a day, but I always notice it, like it's waiting, like it remembers more than I do. Sometimes I touch it without realizing, letting my fingers run along the wood-worn smooth from years of holding other people's lives. It's strange what the quiet does to you. It turns ordinary things into sacred relics. A chipped teacup becomes a companion. A worn cushion becomes a confidant, and an empty coat hook becomes a wound. They don't see it, of course. When they come, if they come, they breeze past it. They don't ask about the coat I always wear. They don't notice the hook is bare. But I notice everything. That's what mothers do. I remember the day I first hung that hook. My husband and I installed it ourselves, 4 pegs solid oak. We thought we'd need more eventually. I imagined our children growing, bringing home friends, spouses, children of their own. I imagined winter evenings with the hallway full of dripping jackets and the smell of food warming in the kitchen. Some of that came true, but most of it didn't last. And now I think about taking it down, about sanding the wall clean, painting it over, pretending it was never there. But I can't, because even if it stands empty, it stands for something. It stands for all the arrivals, all the partings, all the years I spent being the place they return to. Even if they don't anymore, I leave the hook empty now, not out of hope, but out of respect, like a candle kept burning for someone who may never come back, but who once did, often, and for whom I waited gladly. The quiet hits hardest in the evening. There's something about the way the light fades slow and amber that makes the silence feel heavier than during the day. Once evenings were my favorite, the golden hour when the house came alive. The kitchen clattered with pans, the hallway echoed with laughter, and voices overlapped in that beautiful chaos only families make. Now it's just one teacup, one chair, one sound, the soft tick of the wall clock, and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I still make tea every night out of habit mostly, 1 spoon of leaves, hot water from the kettle steeped until the color is just right. I sit at the same corner of the kitchen table, cupping the warmth between my palms as if holding something fragile. Sometimes I take a second cup down from the cabinet out of instinct. but I always put it back. No one's coming. I used to have evening conversations not just about big things, but the small rhythms that make up a life. How school was, whether the soup was too salty, if anyone had called. I miss that more than anything, being asked questions, being part of someone's thoughts. Now, even when they call, the voices are rushed. Just checking in, they say. Everything good, they ask, but not like they want the full answer, just the summary. The safe, digestible version. So I give it to them. Everything's fine. Click, done. But things aren't fine. I miss hearing my name said aloud. Not mom in passing or grandma in a greeting, but my name spoken with care, like I'm a person with a past, not just a role. I miss being seen, noticed, known. Sometimes when the tea cools and the light disappears completely, I turn on the television just for background noise, not to watch anything, just to fill the air with voices, laughter commercials, music, reminders that the world is still turning even if mine has stalled. I don't cry, not usually. The tears dried up a long time ago, but sometimes I feel them in other ways, in the heaviness behind my eyes, in the lump that rises when I try to speak too long, in the way my hands tremble when I reach for my cup. There's a photo on the wall beside the table, the whole family taken years ago. Everyone smiling. I remember that day. I had planned the gathering, cooked for hours, cleaned the house top to bottom. No one noticed, of course. But that's not why I did it. I did it because I wanted that moment, the full table, the clinking glasses, the illusion of togetherness. That photo has faded slightly. The frame is crooked, but I don't straighten it anymore. Somehow it feels more honest this way. They don't see this version of me, the one who sits alone and stirs her tea, slowly watching shadows stretch across the tile, the one who listens to the clock, like it might say something if she waits long enough. They see the version I show, composed, smiling, practical. They think I'm content with my routines, that I enjoy the solitude, that I'm so good at being alone. But I'm not. I'm just good at pretending. Because saying the truth, I'm lonely, feels like opening a door to a room no one wants to enter. So instead I make my tea. I set one cup. I drink in silence. And I wrap myself in the memory of noise. Sometimes the neighbors' lights turn on across the street. I see families gathered at tables, silhouettes moving behind curtains. I tell myself I'm happy for them. And maybe I am. But deep down I miss being part of a world that revolved around more than shadows and steam, and a single teacup on a cold countertop. They think I'm fragile now. They speak slower when they talk to me, as if age has chipped away at my understanding. They offer to carry bags I've lifted for decades. They correct me gently on things I already know, as if I'm a child who needs guidance through her own kitchen. But I'm not fragile. I'm weathered. There's a difference. They see the lines in my face, the stiffness in my walk, and think I've lost my edge. But they don't know the storms I've walked through barefoot sometimes, and always alone. They don't know how many nights I stayed awake when they were sick, waiting for fevers to break, pressing cold cloths to warm foreheads. They don't know how many jobs I worked, how many miles I walked, when the car broke down and the rent was due. I never told them. I didn't want them to grow up feeling the weight I carried. I wanted their backs to be straight, their futures light, their eyes filled with possibility instead of calculation. So I bore it all, quietly, proudly. And now they speak to me like I need protection, as if I don't remember how to navigate my own life. They say things like, "You should rest more, Mom," or "Don't worry about that, we'll take care of it." But they never do. The offers are polite, symbolic, not real. They think I'm someone who needs to be told what to do, but they forget I'm the one who taught them what to do. I'm the one who held it all together with threadbare resolve and a voice that never rose even when the world felt like it was falling apart. What they don't see, what they'll never see, is the woman who once stood in the kitchen hair a mess apron, stained stirring soup with one hand and holding a crying baby with the other. The woman who made do with too little, who turned scarcity into comfort, who never let them feel the weight of her fear. They only see what time has done to my body, not what life has demanded of my soul. I once fixed the water heater myself because there was no one else to call. I once sewed curtains from an old bedsheet so they could have privacy in the room they shared. I once walked in a snowstorm to get cough syrup because my son wouldn't stop wheezing. I didn't think twice. That's what you do when love isn't a word, it's an action. Now they drop by and say things like, "You should get help around the house." And maybe they're right. Maybe I should. But what they don't know is that I already did. I was the help. I was the system. I was the one who did all the invisible work that kept our little world from collapsing. They praise me sometimes. "You were always so strong, Mom." But it's in past tense, like strength is something I used to carry, but don't anymore. They're wrong. I still carry it. Not on my back, maybe, but in my silence, in the way I listen without interrupting, in the way I forgive without being asked, in the way I smile when they forget, when they overlook, when they leave too soon. Strength now looks different. It looks like not reminding them of the things I did. It looks like sitting alone at the table and not letting bitterness sour the tea. It looks like not asking for what I know won't come. But it's still strength. They'll realize it one day, maybe when their own hands start to shake, when they have their own children, when the weight of caretaking humbles them. Maybe then they'll think back to me and wonder how I did it all, with so little, with so much love. And maybe, just maybe, they'll look in the mirror and see a flicker of me. Not the fragile version. The fire. My shirts are old, yes, but my spine is straight. The fabric on my back may be thinned by years of wear and washed into paleness, but I still stand tall. I walk slower now, more carefully, but with a kind of grace I never had when I was rushing through life, arms full of children, mind full of to-do lists. I used to think that being worn down meant being broken, that if something looked faded, it had lost its worth. But I've come to see it differently. Now I know that wear is proof of use, of love, of showing up. This morning, I opened my drawer and looked at the same 3 shirts I rotate through the week. One has a rip near the collar. Another's hem is coming loose. The third is the one I wear when I want to feel a little special, still modest, still simple, but with tiny embroidered flowers that only I seem to notice. I don't long for new clothes anymore, not because I wouldn't enjoy them, but because I've outgrown the idea that I need to be polished to be valuable. The world told me in 1,000 small ways that I needed to look a certain way to be loved, that to be worth attention I had to present something shiny, something new. But I did that. For years I kept everything clean and pressed, not just my clothes, but my entire life, my words, my emotions, my expectations. I presented myself like a well-folded napkin, useful, soft, waiting to be opened. Now I wear what I have, and I wear it with pride. I see them sometimes, the women my age, on television, in magazines, even in my neighborhood, trying to erase the years, lifting, tucking, coloring, hiding. And I understand it. I really do. We've all been taught to disappear the moment we're no longer youthful. But I've done enough disappearing. I've been quiet. I've been humble. I've been the background to everyone else's life. And I don't resent that, not really. But I also don't want to vanish entirely. There's a kind of quiet rebellion in continuing to wear what you have and showing up anyway, in being present without apology, in saying with nothing more than your presence, I'm still here. I walked to the store today in one of those old shirts. A woman passed me in a newer dress, fresh makeup, hair styled. She glanced at me and smiled politely, maybe even pityingly. But I smiled back not because I envied her, but because I didn't. I have something she might not, a history written in the very threads of what I wear. Each loose seam tells me I lived a life that prioritized love over labels. Each faded patch reminds me I held children, wiped tears, carried groceries, cooked meals, stitched hopes. I don't expect them to notice anymore. The children I raised, the people I gave myself to, I no longer wait for gratitude. It took me years to understand that some thanks never come, not because they're cruel, but because they don't know what it cost you. And that's okay. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I believed in love that works, that sacrifices, that shows up again and again and again. So yes, I wear old shirts, but my shoulders are strong beneath them. I eat alone, but I chew slowly, knowing that each bite is mine. I wake in a quiet house, but my dreams are full of moments I would live all over again, even knowing how it would end. They forgot the details, the socks, the coats, the meals, the birthdays. But I remember, and I'll keep remembering, because I am not the clothes I wear. I am not the silence they offer me. I am the woman who kept everything going, who gave and gave and gave and still had more. And if they never see that, that's all right, because I do, and that's enough. Sometimes in the evening I sit near the window and let the last of the day pour in that warm, low light that softens every edge. It touches the rim of my teacup, the curve of my chair, the backs of my hands. Everything glows just a little, like the world is whispering that it still sees me, even if no one else does. And I breathe, a long, deep breath. Not because I'm tired, though I often am, but because there's something sacred about stillness, about knowing I've made it through another day, about holding the quiet in my chest like an old friend. I've spent years mourning things no one else noticed had been lost. Not people, not place, but roles. Roles I filled so completely, so quietly, that their absence feels like air missing from a room. Mother, caretaker, listener, mender of everything. When those roles faded, no one rang a bell. No one closed a door. They just slipped away like evening light across the floorboards. But I remain. And there is a strange kind of peace in that, in knowing that even if the world has forgotten the weight, I carried the love. I gave the pieces of myself I handed out. Like bread at a table, I remember. My body remembers. My hands, my spine, my eyes. They have seen it all, and they are still here. There is no applause for this kind of life. No trophies. No standing ovations, just a quiet kind of dignity that lives in old fabric-worn shoes and soft routines. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it always was. I don't need loud anymore. I don't need to be needed the way I once was. Now I need gentleness, soft mornings, unrushed tea, a good night's sleep, and the freedom to finally say I gave everything I had. And though I was forgotten in return, I did not forget myself. I lived, I loved, I carried, and now at last I rest,